Hello and welcome to Teacher Tavi, where Tavi, I'm a teacher, I'm a Senko, I'm a head of school. I'm going to take you through the UK education news of the day. So, start off with, we're just going to dive into some key updates that are currently shaping the UK system right now, from government policies, ongoing challenges faced by students and teachers. So we've got a lot to cover today, from exam reforms, teacher pay disputes. So let's start by talking about the ongoing funding cuts in schools. If you've been following the news recently, you'll know that school funding continues to be a massive issue. Many head teachers, like myself across the UK, have been warned that our schools are going to face financial crisis with cuts in funding, which are going to make it increasingly more difficult to provide adequate resources for students. Already we have been facing that for decades. It's not about books, it's not about supplies, but we're talking about significant staff shortages, cuts to our mental health support, and far fewer extracurricular opportunities. So the NEU today has been very vocal about the immediate action to prevent further cuts, which they say are leading to poorer outcomes for students. Schools can't get enough teachers, and the ones that we do have are being stretched incredibly thin. So the Institute for Fiscal Studies released a report that showed that the real terms funding for schools has fallen by 5% over the past decade, while inflation, as we all know, is making everything far more expensive. It's really tough out there. The cost of living crisis, which many teachers are now having to turn to food banks just to make ends meet. The Department for Education has promised additional funding through certain areas, but there are critics out there argue that it's not enough to address the vast scale of the issue. So the other thing we're going to talk about today is GCSEs. Should they be scrapped? The future of GCSEs. So there's been a lot of debate recently about whether exams should be overhauled or if they should just be scrapped altogether. This is probably due to the pandemic and what happened with the exam system there, or the lack of. And many are now asking, should we just be rethinking our approach to testing completely? So it's about the stress and pressure, as I've talked about previously with mental health and well-being. The stress for students is just completely overwhelming, and we know, if you work in schools, we know that the mental health concerns among students are rising exponentially, and that some saying the traditional form of exam system is just only making things worse. And there's a lot of growing support for alternatives. So in my school, we are looking at project-based assessments, digital portfolios, creating that from 3 to 18. That's something that I'm looking at as a head. And coursework. In fact, last month, the Education Select Committee called for a review of GCSEs and suggested that they need to evolve to be fit for future, particularly in light of how the world of work has changed significantly, particularly since the pandemic, but also is going to change. It's not about stress either. It's not just about that, Critics have argued that exams don't reflect the diverse skills that students need to develop. They're often focused on memorization, recall, and are ignoring those essential skills that we need in the workplace: creativity, teamwork, problem solving. Those are incredibly vital skills that are needed. And some people argue that it's just not there in the exam system that we have now. So moving on to our other segment, we're looking at teacher pay disputes, strikes, protests. Teachers in England and Wales, we're now facing another reality of another year of strikes. The NEU has been leading that change, arguing that teachers have seen a pay cut over a decade now. And there's no denying that this impact has had on the profession. Teachers are leaving at such an alarming rate. I see that with ECTs who come in and after some don't even make that 2 year. They can't do it. It's too much. And I don't blame them a lot of the time. There's no denying there's been a huge impact on the profession. Teachers are leaving the field at an alarming rate. poor pay, long hours, increasing stress, spread thin. And those are the reasons that people are leaving. In fact, a recent survey showed that nearly 1 in 4 teachers have considered or are considering leaving the profession within the next 5 years. If you work in education, it's probably not going to come as a shock. But we are at a crisis, as we all know, because there's not many of us, there's not many teachers about. Schools are finding it harder to recruit. They're finding it difficult to retain qualified staff, particularly in subjects like maths, sciences, languages. And the strikes, yes, major points of contention. Some parents support the teachers, but others are obviously naturally frustrated about the disruption caused to their children's education. But the unions say that without pay improvements, things are only going to get worse. The government's response has so far been to offer some pay rises, but unions say they don't go far enough to make teaching an attractive career option again. And we're also going to just look back on mental health, which we have touched on in a few of our segments here, but we're looking now at how schools are responding to that. So we've seen, as I said, if you work in schools, there's been a growing concern for educators, parents, students to look at mental health in schools. Now, a recent report by the Children's Commissioner for England found that 1 in 10 children and young people are dealing with mental health issues. Something I'm definitely looking at as ahead is wellbeing trackers, looking at how we teach that, how we intervene, how all of the early signs, all of the symptoms, all of the outreach support that we can get in. The pressures of school, social media, they're just growing in today's world, and they are taking a huge toll on our young people. And schools are therefore under a lot of pressure to provide better support, but we don't have those resources to meet the demand for the mental health services. But thankfully, there are some schools who are making strides. Earlier this year, the government announced funding for mental health support teams in schools, which is a massive positive step forward, but still calling for more comprehensive mental health education support as part of the curriculum. The other thing, I think we've got a lot better at this, certainly since the pandemic, is about destigmatising mental health. If students feel that they can talk openly about the mental health, if it's a discussion based, they don't feel fear about it, they're more likely to seek help when they need it. But as we know, there's always going to be work done. So what is next for education? So as we've seen today, there's no shortage of challenges for UK education: funding cuts, teacher pay disputes, exam reforms, mental health support. And yes, there are certainly a lot of problems that we need to address. There's also a huge opportunity here that we have to reshape education for the future, whether that's through better funding, mental health initiatives, or even exam reform. It's going to be a defining period for schools in the next few years. So we're going to keep an eye on all those developments, bringing you those updates. I will be every day, all those updates as they happen. But please talk. What do you think about the future of education in the UK? What do you think it should be? Where do you think the focus should lie? Let me know. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.